Hello.
Hello, Bryan. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Dream Idiots. My name is Morris. As I said, that fellow's Bryan. This is episode 149 of our podcast, Dream Idiots, where each week we tell each other stories and bring you along for the ride and throw in occasional news updates and curse words of the week and all kinds of good stuff. Bryan, do we have any announcements or anything to get folks up to date as we head into our sesquicentennial episode
No
soon?
real updates that I can think of. Website stuff is still being worked on. I think we're up to date on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Not iHeartRadio is still not quite syncing right. We're still hammering out some tech issues. Everything related to us, related to Dream Idiots, can be found at dreamidiots.com. So if you can, like, share, subscribe. If you want to shoot us a review, we haven't had any new reviews in a while. Giving us a review would be great. Some updates on the merch as well. So if you could check out dreamidiots.com and click on merchandise, that's been reorganized and made simpler and easier to use. And thanks for hanging in there with us. We appreciate it.
Got a couple new listeners I want to give a shout out to. Kelly down in Colorado Springs and Derek here, just here in Centennial, Colorado, actually, who've been listening to the show
Oh,
lately.
cool.
So welcome aboard, folks.
Excellent.
Um, Other than that, no big announcements, I guess. No big updates. Nothing big from what we normally update people on. Executions and
No,
other funny stuff.
I've got happily, I've been very productive. There's drilling going on outside. Sorry for the background noise.
I
Can
can't
you
hear
hear
it.
that? You can't
Not
hear
yet.
that?
No.
Okay. I'll just keep trundling ahead. It sounds like I'm being invaded, but we'll just keep going forward. I suspect I have lots of updates coming up. My legal pad here of story ideas is getting longer, and so future updates coming soon, I believe.
All right. Well, you get to go first, correct? Yes, you do.
Yes,
So
149.
what you got for us?
So, doing some more history this week. Oluale Kossala, Kossola, is this man's name. He was born in the West African country of Benin. So Benin is there basically between Ivory Coast and Nigeria. His father was also named Oluale. His mother was Oluwale's second wife, Fondlolu. He was the second of four children, but he had 12 step siblings. So I think Oluwale, his father, had another wife who may have passed away. He's a member of the Yoruba people in the area,
Mm-hmm.
more specifically tied to the Isha subgroup. And this traditional home is in the Bante region of eastern Benin. Eastern Benin. I'm going to refer to him as Kossola through the entire story. Later on, his name will change, but Kossola is his name from birth, so I'm going to use that throughout. Born into a somewhat modest family, but his grandfather was an officer of his town's king. So they had perhaps a slightly better than average life. Had a happy and active childhood. At 14, he started training as a soldier. He learned how to hunt and camp, shoot arrows, throw spears, learned how to defend his town, which was surrounded by four tall walls. As a teenager, he was inducted into the Oro. It's a secret male society whose role was basically police and control local society. At 19, Kossola falls in love with a girl he sees at a local market, and his father urged him, "Well, if you want to get married, you have to go through basically the rites of initiation, the rituals to get permission to marry." And so he and this young woman start that process. In April 1860, as he's 19 years old, in the midst of his training, the neighboring town slash kingdom of Dahomey attacks his town. So, in one account, it's the king of the neighboring town is called Gezo, Ghezo. This is 1860. I believe it's actually Gezo's son who does this. I think Gezo had passed away in 1858. Nevertheless, there is an invasion into his town. His king and many of the people in this town are killed, and a great number of them are taken prisoner. So his town is called a kingdom, and I don't really have a strong sense of sort of size or population here. It's sometimes referred to as a kingdom, sometimes referred to as a town. It certainly has hundreds of inhabitants, maybe thousands of inhabitants, but I don't really have a strong sense of how big we're talking. Okay.
Okay.
It's clear that poverty and regional skirmishes are fairly common, fairly problematic. Um, and At some point, hundreds of years before his birth in this part of the world, they realized that the soil here was incredibly useful for building these high clay walls that surround his town. Virtually every town in this area of the world has a clay wall around it. If you Google the earthworks of Benin, there's lots of research on these walls. They've been written about extensively, and collectively, they're nearly as long as the Great Wall of China. They're actually
Oh my God.
fairly impressive, but sort of little known. So Kossola and a number of his companions are captured, and they are marched to the sea to the south, to a town called Ouida on the coast, and they're held there for 3 weeks in a pen called a barracoon. They're basically being held there because they're about to be transported across the Atlantic to guess where?
Here.
Mobile, Alabama.
Oh my God.
In perhaps the most disgusting example of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Gezo, or Gezo's son. He's the king of the neighboring country, but it's clear that he is financially motivated to make sure there's a nice new fresh
Hmm.
supply of slaves that can be exported, because he doesn't want to export his own people. He may as well grab some
Right.
for the neighboring village. And so he apparently routinely just invades other areas, gathers up whoever he can capture, drags them to the beach, and they take off. They're hauled away. So why is it lucrative? Well, in 1860, obviously, slavery is rife in North America. Uh, but the practice of kidnapping, I mean, the practice of bringing new slaves across the Atlantic was made illegal in 1807,
Oh.
many years prior. So reasonable people, sane people would look at this and decide that the risk associated with engaging in this type of behavior is just entirely too high. But human scum realized that the price tag just went up, right? I mean, demand
Hmm.
is still
Yeah.
as high as it ever was, but supply has dropped. Basic, econ 101. And so, there are some now limited people who are perfectly willing to do this. And there actually had been one man, a man in Georgia, who had been prosecuted for illegally still engaging in the slave trade, but he was naturally acquitted by the all-white jury. So all systems are go for proceeding with this plan. So Kossola and 109 others from various regions in Benin and Nigeria are boarded upon a ship called the Clotilda. It's captained by a shipbuilder from Mobile named William Foster, and they head across the Atlantic Ocean. And they are at sea for 45 days. That's how long it takes at this
Ooh.
point in history to make that passage. Um, it's a rough trip. Only two of the slaves actually die en route, which is stunning to me because
That's yeah. That's
I could have sworn I read in the past that the mortality rate, for these ships is like 25 or 30%. So only two pass away, but he's not fed much, given very little water, and he's also has to endure the humiliation of the fact that he was thrown on the ship naked. So
mm,
he has no clothing either. So the making it shameful as well. The cruelty is the point, right? So this ship lands in Mobile, where he's enslaved by a man named James Maher. He's a wealthy ship captain. He's the brother of a man named Timothy Maher. It's Timothy who had organized this expedition in the first place. To avoid detection, they came into Mobile Bay in the middle of the night because they didn't want to be caught. Maher was unable to pronounce Kossola's name, and so Kossola apparently told him to just call me Cudjo, Cudjo. It's a common name given to boys in West Africa who'd been born on a Monday.
Hmm.
Kossola doesn't seem that difficult, but again, Americans, right? We're lazy that way. So, so he's there for, the duration of the Civil War, working on a steamship, and he basically lives with his shipmates under Maher's house, which is built on stilts, built high above ground. And the reason it's built this way is because Maher's house and his huge property is called Magazine Point. It's basically built on a swamp.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
early on, when they are there, law enforcement does try to come to the property to investigate and inspect the rumors of all these new slaves that are on the property, but they strike out. The Mobile River is marshy; it's impossible to navigate. The only way to the main house is by boat. You can't just walk there, and so Mayher is able to hide these slaves around the property in various other other buildings.
Outbuildings and
Right, right, and he has other slaves, and so I mean, and it's likely that most of them may not have understood what was going on. Or they're being moved around. I mean, if they knew, I would imagine
Mhm.
someone would try to sneeze or make their
Yeah.
presence known. But he gets away with it.
So what slavery was still legal in the States
Slavery was still legal in the state, but they
because the
had
Confederacy, but so what was illegal
what
about the way they were procured?
you couldn't bring more across. But at this point, 12 million
Oh, gotcha,
slaves.
gotcha,
It's 12
gotcha.
million
Okay.
slaves over the course of the Mid-Atlantic slave trade had been the right wing view would be imported. The correct way would be kidnapped, in
Yes.
terms of in terms of absconded with, brutalized is the right way to say this. And so it's the practice of bringing new ones in
Gotcha. Okay.
that's illegal. So it was Maher that had commissioned the Clotilda to make this voyage in the first place, and he had actually placed a bet stating he could do this and get away with it. He was right. When they were done, he had the ship captain actually torch the Clotilda and sink it in the river, in the middle of the Mobile River. So he
So
wanted
as
to
an
come.
example of so they wouldn't be able to find the Clotilda,
Mhm,
men
right,
wouldn't be able to
right,
find it.
right.
Okay,
So
just
it
checking.
torches it, and the boat sinks.
Gotcha.
1865 rolls around, and Emancipation Proclamation, end of the Civil War. So Kossola is in, and all of his shipmates are granted their freedom. He takes the last name Lewis, so he's actually known at this time as Cudjo Lewis. Lewis Oluale. They speculate that the Lu in Oluale is
Oh, okay. Yeah.
bastardized into Lewis. He marries a young woman named Abile, who had been on the Clotilda, and their goal is we want to go home. This is this is horse shit.
Hmm.
Take us home. Well, Maher and no one else is gonna. Okay, you're free now because we have to let you go, but I'm not paying to send you back. You screw that. You're staying here.
Roll Tide.
Um, right. Right. In my mind, in this story, in the motion picture of this story, Maher is played by Tommy Tuberville, right? Just a old fat white man with huge ears. So they can't go back. So they decide to stay in Alabama. They don't really decide to. It's kind of forced upon them.
Yeah, what choice do
Uh,
they have at that point?
Right. And there's no reparations. Kossola is sort of nominated. He becomes sort of the chosen spokesperson for this group of 32 now former slaves of Maher's. They are able, I don't know how they're able to do this, how they're able to gather up money, but they do purchase from Maher a portion of his land to the north of Mobile, up on a hill. So it's up out of the marshlands. And so they stay there and they establish African Town in Mobile. It is still there to this day. Kossola works as a shingle maker, but he's injured in a train accident in 1902. He sues the railroad company. He loses because he's a black man, but he does become African Town's church sexton. I judge from that he's able to eke out something in the way of an existence and have some income. It's kind of hard to know.
So by now he's probably in his 60s,
So
1902. He's getting up there,
Or
right?
raised late as 1902.
I thought you said he was injured in
Yeah. Oh,
1902.
yep. You're right.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
1902. So yeah. So he is early 60s. Yeah, late
Okay.
50s,
Yeah.
early 60s. You're right. So during the course of the tail end of the 19th century, he did marry. He wound up having six children, five sons and one daughter. To sort of mark their attachment to their African culture, they gave most of their children both Yoruba names and American names. Unfortunately, his children and his wife are not long lived.
Hmm.
Three of his children die of various diseases. His son David is actually hit by a train and killed.
Jesus Christ.
His daughter Polly, disappears. She just up and vanishes. It's sort of assumed that she was, it's probably some sort of lynching, hate crime, probably
Hmm.
just right because that's just what happened. And Cudjoe Jr. Was actually killed by a deputy sheriff. So proof, if proof were needed, that racism in in law enforcement is a feature, not a bug, right? It's never ending. His wife Abile passes away in 1908, right around the same time that son Alec had died. And so again, Kossola is going through this period of his life where he is longing for family and missing family and has very little of his own.
Hmm.
At least one of his children had children, so he does have a couple of grandchildren at this point in time. So not all is lost, but it's a time of financial hardship. Kossola then has to sell some portions of the land that they had purchased, but by the early 1920s, everyone who'd come across on the Clotilda had died. So he is the lone survivor of the ship. And during the last few days of his life, years of his life, he did achieve some level of fame when a few different writers and journalists discovered, kind of figured, found out about his story. He was interviewed by a Alabama-born author and historian, Zora Neale Hurston.
Hmm. Sure.
Written, I want to say she's written a book on, I've read something of hers, maybe on Frederick Douglass. I'm not sure, I'm not now sure what it was, but she actually took some film footage of him. So he is the only
Oh, wow.
American slave where there is motion pictures of this man. Uh, Oluale Kossala slash Cudjoe Lewis died of old age on July 26, 1935, at about the age of 94. He passes away
Wow.
4 months before my mother was born, and my father was 4 years old when this man dies. He had always wanted to go back home, but never managed to do that. He is buried in the African cemetery that opened in Mobile in 1876. There's apparently a tall white monument that marks his grave. He does have descendants that still live in the area, and there are the last two survivors of the group that founded African Town, Sally Smith and Matilda McQueer, passed away in 1937 and 1940, respectively. All the way in 2018, a reporter named Ben Rains and a team of underwater archaeologists found the wreck of the Clotilda in the
Oh,
river.
wow.
In the 12-mile island section of the Mobile River. They didn't announce the discovery until a year later. The Alabama Historical Commission announced the discovery. The wreck site is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There is something called the Africa Town Heritage House, which is run by the History Museum of Mobile. It didn't open until 2023. Uh, but a cool little snapshot of history. If you look at pictures of this guy, he just looks like a complete badass to me. I don't know, I don't know.
Hmm.
He has just an incredible. This sounds vain or something, but incredible charisma just in these old black and white photos. Just seems like a complete, yeah, very interesting dude. I was kind of holding the story for a while, trying to figure out a reason to use it. Just recently, we had the anniversary of Plessy versus Ferguson, and also Brown versus the
Hmm.
anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education was May 18th. If you don't think black people are people, if you don't think brown people are people, et cetera, gay people, trans people, women, et cetera, there's something wrong with you. If you bother to go through ancestry.com or any of those sites and get your genealogy done, your DNA test done, you will discover all of us, you, me, everyone listening to me right now, part of your DNA came from this part of the world. A man
Hmm.
like Oluale Kossala is a direct ancestor, not 3 generations ago or 10 generations ago. This is where all people came from. And so I don't know. I found this guy's story and thought it was interesting enough to share.
Oh, that is very fascinating. And here's the thing. That's the kind of story that makes up the tapestry of America.
Right,
So when we hear all this stuff about immigrants and, well, what are these, these not real Americans? It's like very few of us are real Americans and descended from real Americans, if there's any
right.
such thing as
Unless you're
real American.
Navajo,
Yeah, or Hopi or any of the
right?
tribes,
Any of them,
and
right?
it's just it's it's appalling to me when people who are so clearly racist and just this nationalist mentality, the Stephen Millers of the world, the Steve Bannons of the world, just these awful, awful people, that the history of this country is made up of stories like this, right? I mean, it's
Right,
just
absolutely.
it is part of the story, and it is the basis from which this country was built, moving west.
And you have to
It's
think
just
that, I mean, you know, I didn't realize that the slave trade itself, the importation of additional slaves was made illegal so much earlier.
I didn't
Uh,
either.
and you can totally see how right wingers in today's world. I mean that's just part and parcel with it's like that's now illegal. How can I possibly make money off of
What's
that?
what's a
Like,
way I can get around this?
right?
What's the
How can I foster? So I'm a right winger and I'm hateful as shit, and the only standards I have are double standards. So how can I fuck someone over to make some money?
I had a neighbor of a conservative bent tell me, "Why do you recycle? There's no money in it."
Right. That's not the fucking point.
Brian, that is a fascinating chapter.
Uh,
Thank you so much. Stories of West Africa are so brutal that
right.
just the history of one of the most tumultuous parts of the world is also where it's the cradle of civilization. I mean,
Right.
it's
Right.
like you said, we've all come from that. So fascinating story.
Thought you'd like that.
Thank you. Cujo Lewis. I like that. Cujo Lewis.
Well, I'm guessing I'm not totally sure on the pronunciation, but cool dude.
Very much so. And
Right.
just he outlived everyone. I
By
mean, he was
decades.
he was a lastling. Yeah, he was the
uh,
last of just
right.
on a complete change of pace. Do we have a curse word of the week this week?
Mm-hmm. The curse word you will not have heard this because I basically made it up, but it's connected to a news story I saw.
Okay.
A pothole cockblock. Pothole cockblock. Pothole cockblock. Want to guess?
Well, I know the pothole syndrome is what occurs with news editors when something happens to a news editor in their life and they decide that needs to become a news story for everybody. It's called the pothole syndrome in the
Is it?
newspaper business. Yeah, where what we need to
Oh,
do? We
I've
need to
not
write a
heard
feature
that.
on potholes. Yeah, it's just this idea that syndrome might not be the right word, but it's this idea that we all make decisions on what kind of news stories we coverage, and they're not all based on being unbiased. That it's your
Right, right.
experience brings with you what you're going to try to frame a news story around. And in the case, it's the pothole syndrome.
Oh, okay.
So that's the only thing I can think of. Pothole cock block, but I
So that's not it. But
okay.
apparently, the roads around so your house, your neighborhood, as I recall, roads are generally better than average. In San Antonio, roads down here
Yes.
are definitely more scattershot in terms of their quality. I'm not sure whether that's
Hmm.
just because the ground here is so weird, but we've all had that scenario where there's a pothole and there's a pothole and it just gets bigger and it's there
Hmm.
for a year and never gets filled, never gets filled, never gets filled. Well, one apparent way to ensure the pothole gets filled sooner sooner rather than later is when you see a big pothole, you take a can of spray paint and you go paint quickly in 3 motions a cock and balls right on top of it. And so what happens then is people won't complain about the pothole, but they will complain about the graffiti. And the city won't come out and paint more over it. They'll come out and actually patch the pothole. So
That
if you
is
if you have a
brilliant.
pothole, right, if you have a pothole anywhere near your house and you want it to be fixed, just go out there and
Just
quickly.
big old cock and balls right there in
Right,
the middle of the pothole. That
right.
is, Brian, that
People
is
blow a
brilliant.
gasket, and that will solve your problem post haste.
It's a curse word that is extremely, it's an action that is just, it's such an elegant, it's very Alexander the Great of you, Brian. Cut that knot in half. That's
Right.
pothole cock block. Brian, I'm going to take us in a totally different direction, kind of, sort of. What do you know about Pittsburgh? This is for my story. What do you know about Pittsburgh?
I know the Pirates. I know Carnegie Mellon.
Brian,
I hated
Brian,
the Steelers.
Brian,
No.
Brian,
Oh,
stop.
okay.
Did you not hear the lack of a silent H on the end of that? You're talking
Mm.
about Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm not
Oh
talking
no,
about
Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh.
Texas.
I'm talking about Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Oh, okay.
Is there something wrong with your hearing? You didn't hear that
The Pittsburgh.
the H being gone. I'm talking today about Pittsburgh, Kansas, Brian, and
Okay.
two restaurants which have been duking it out there since the 1940s.
Oh,
This duel has been featured on Food Wars and BBC Travel. It's even garnered an article in the New Yorker magazine. The story idea comes from a regular listener, longtime listener, Bay Area Brad, who guessed that this week's pair of culinary combatants would be the subject of a previous episode, episode 147. It was a great guess on his part, but Bay Area Brad was wrong. That episode detailed the American versus Lafayette Coney Island rivalry, as you may recall, in Detroit. But it was great of Brad to guess and write in. And so for him, here's the story of the battle between Chicken Annie's and Chicken Mary's in Pittsburgh, Kansas. If you're a new listener and you like this, go back and check out previous episodes on Detroit and Minneapolis. Before we get into the actual rivalry, let's learn a little bit about Pittsburgh, no H, Kansas. The city's origins go back to the 1870s, where a series of coal mining camps and railroad lines converged. This modest stopover was christened New Pittsburgh with an H in 1876, named after Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A good yardstick for a town's history is often reflected in the establishment of a post office, as we've seen so often in our
sure.
stories. In this case, it was August 26, 1876. By 1880 or so, the name was shortened to Pittsburgh, no new. And it was shortened yet again in 1894 by dropping that pesky H at the end of Pittsburgh. More on that in a moment. Let's take a brief break to acknowledge a couple of other H-less Pittsburghs. So we're going to wander a bit, Brian. First, there's Pittsburgh, California. Named after Pittsburgh, PA, just like its namesake in Kansas, Pittsburgh, California is home to the Los Medanos College Mustangs. Their colors are cardinal and gold. It's also home to a quartet of acting brothers, some of whom appeared in Hook. The Basco brothers, all of them actors, Dante, Darian, Derek, and Dion. I've never seen Hook because I don't like Peter Pan in any form. And you just mentioned this one, Pittsburgh, Texas.
Right.
There's a Pittsburgh, Texas. It's not named after Pittsburgh, PA. It's the birthplace of
Joe Pitt. No, no,
elected asshole Louis Gohmert, former
no.
U.S.
Oh, okay.
representative,
Right.
who at one time admitted to the popular belief that he was, quote, the dumbest guy in Congress.
I
Gohmert
agree.
arrived during the influx of Tea Party Republicans in 2010s. Notable Tea Party caucus members include representatives such as Steve King of Iowa, Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota, and Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina. Senators in this caucus include Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul of Kentucky, Tim Scott of South Carolina, and John Cornyn and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then there's also Mike Lee of Utah, and perhaps the dumbest person in the Senate, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. And allow me to expand for a moment about Gohmert, even though this is not a story about Gohmert. It's a story about Pittsburgh, Kansas. During Gohmert's 9-term tenure with the U.S. House, he passed exactly one bill that became law, one which apparently simplified the 911 emergency system. So good for him. But as my dad used to say, even a blind pig finds an acorn now and then. Aside from the 911 measure, the rest of his career is afire with stupidity. But don't let any of this affect your perception of Pittsburgh, Texas. The town motto is, after all, yeah, Louis Gohmert, but at least it's not Pete Hegseth. Before we return to Kansas, Brian, what is the deal with the H and H-less versions of Pittsburgh anyway? Any idea?
Yeah, no clue.
Well, I'm glad you asked. There's a regulatory body for settling disputes with spellings, derogatory names, and so forth over towns and cities. It's called the United States Board on Geographic Names. I'll refer to it as the BGN. It was established in 1890 by executive order.
Hmm.
And executive orders, of course, do not affect us whatsoever to this day in this country. It was executive order number 28 from President Benjamin Harrison. And I think that's 28 overall,
Wow.
not the 28th from Benjamin Harrison. The original goal of this board was to create uniform place names for the purposes of cartography. Brian, imagine that you're heading west, say after the Civil War, kind of in the time period you were talking about just now, and having to navigate an endless list of contradictory town names. Suppose that the last chance for supplies for 200 miles was a town named Miller's Corner. Okay,
Hmm.
so Miller's Corner is where you need to stop. You arrive in what you think is Miller's Corner, only to find out that it's actually someplace else. This ain't Miller's Corner, son. You passed Miller's Corner a while back. Folks there call it Turnipville, which don't work because they don't grow turnips there no more. They grow rhubarb, which makes the folks down south in Rhubarb Springs hopping mad. There's no springs in Rhubarb Springs no more because they had to move the town 2 miles to the east on account of the flood of 62. And don't get me started on the idiots living down in Floodtown. They ain't got the sense God gave a grasshopper. Oh, I'm sorry, what's the name of this here place where we stand right now? Well, that's a matter of debate, which makes for a very interesting story. I'll stop. As it pertains to towns ending in burg, the BGN decided that BURG should be the standard spelling, hence the Pittsburghs in Kansas, California, and Texas. They are all H-less. Burg, with an H as a Germanic suffix, indicates a fortified town or castle. And that makes a lot of sense given the colonial British Fort Pitt morphed into the modern city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Burg also shares linguistic roots with the Old English word of borough, which I'm very familiar with having lived in New York,
Sure.
as in the five boroughs of New York. Pittsburgh, PA was named by a Scottish general, John Forbes, in honor of William Pitt, aka Pitt the Elder, the first Earl of Chatham, and one-time British Prime Minister. Being a Scotsman, Forbes most likely gave Pittsburgh the Scottish treatment and pronounced the founded city like Edinburgh, so it would have sounded something like Pittsburgh, not Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
when it was first founded. There's a few other H-burg cities in the U.S. New York has four of them: Greenburgh, Hamptonburg, Newburgh, and Plattsburgh. Indiana claims another Edinburgh. I'm going to say Edinburgh because it's Americanized, as does Ohio. But the latter Edinburgh in Ohio is now a ghost town. There are people still living in these other burgs. The BGN was absorbed into the Department of the Interior in 1937 during Franklin Roosevelt's presidency, only to be resurrected via public law in 1947. In addition to standardizing names, separate board committees also christen Antarctic sites and undersea geographic features. So when there's something to be named, say the Gulf of America, they're there to do it.
Huh.
From the 1960s through, say, 2025, the BGN also eliminated racially offensive names or names associated with individuals revealed to be less than good persons. I'll give you a case in point. Mount Evans here in Colorado. When the name was changed to Mount Blue Sky in 2023, it was because the namesake of Mount Evans was early Colorado Territory Governor John Evans, of whom historical committees from University of Denver and Northwestern determined had participated in the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864, where as many as 500 Cheyenne and Arapaho people were flat out murdered, most of them women, children, and the elderly. So, the Arapaho tribe, as well as the northern and southern Cheyenne tribes, were consulted in this renaming process. The term blue sky addresses both the Cheyenne ceremony of the same name and the Arapaho tribe's other moniker, the Blue Sky People. While the mountain was given a name change, the land around it still carries the title of Mount Evans Wilderness Area, because that's under the purview of U.S. Congress. It requires congressional approval. I've got the feeling this is not going to happen anytime soon. I think it's going to remain the Mount Evans Wilderness area, given that on January 20th, 2025, on his goddamned inauguration day, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order. Remember where Executive Order 28?
Mm.
Signed Executive Order 14,172, changing the name of Mount Denali back to Mount McKinley after the name was changed in 2015 by the Obama administration, an act then supported by Alaskan U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican. In fact, an overwhelming number of people in Alaska approved the name change. All of this name changing simply reflects the fact that Donald Trump is, among other things, an equal opportunity asshole. Now, Bryan, I think we started off talking about Pittsburg, Kansas. Do you remember Pittsburg, Kansas, Bryan,
Hmm.
from
I
earlier?
do. I do now. Yeah.
Yeah, the town I could have been talking about all along instead of reminding everyone about the vacuum of intelligence and some of our elected officials. Pittsburg, Kansas lies in Crawford County, right on the Kansas-Missouri border. Only Cherokee County separates Crawford County from bordering Oklahoma to the south, so it's in the very corner of that state. You might remember Cherokee County from our Route 66 episode. Kansas has the smallest stretch of the 8 states that contain old Route 66, and it passes right through Cherokee County, so just south of what we're talking about here. Back to Pittsburgh. As of the 2020 census, there are over 20,000 people living there. So this is the smallest so far of all the restaurant cities we've looked at. One native Pittsburgher from Pittsburgh, Kansas, although he grew up in Wichita, was Dennis Rader,
Oh, BTK.
BTK.
Oh, jeez.
He now lives in the El Dorado Correctional Facility, some 33 miles to the east of Wichita, where he's serving 10 consecutive life sentences. An outstanding piece of shit, Dennis Rader. On a slightly more positive note, news anchor Bryan Williams started his career at KOAM TV in 1981. At that time, KOAM was an NBC affiliate in Pittsburgh, although it has the distinction of having also been affiliated with the ABC, CBS, and Dumont networks. Remember Dumont?
Oh, yeah. That's vaguely. Yeah.
They went off the air in 1956, Bryan. That's
Right.
how long Dumont has been gone. Now, actor Gary Busey once attended Pittsburgh State University, though he did not graduate. No idea why. Sally Stonecipher, which is an awesome name, Sally Stonecipher, did graduate from PSU with a history degree in 1972, and she went on to become the first female helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. She retired a colonel. Back to Pittsburgh State University. Let's talk about Pittsburgh State University for a moment. Bryan, Bryan,
Mhm.
if you're the school mascot,
Oh no! I knew this was coming.
if you're the school mascot at Pittsburgh State University and you don't like chocolate or strawberry, you might get called the blank blank.
Oh shit! Don't like
You don't like chocolate or strawberry, you might get called the blank blank. Bryan, if you don't like chocolate or
Oh no!
strawberry and you're the Pittsburgh State University mascot, people might call you the vanilla gorilla. Pittsburgh State University, whose colors are crimson and gold, is the only college or university in the U.S. to have a gorilla as a mascot.
Okay.
His name is Gus.
Gus the gorilla. Okay.
Gus the gorilla. Yep. Now, Bryan, for the meat of the story, so to speak, it has taken
Mm.
us 5 pages to get here. Chicken Annie's and Chicken Mary's are two of 6 fried chicken house restaurants in Crawford County, Kansas. It's the fried chicken house capital of the state. These two go back the farthest. Let's start with the eldest of the pair, Chicken Annie's. In 1934, Hungarian immigrant Anne Pichler started selling sandwiches out of her kitchen to local miners and travelers as a means of financial support. After her husband Charlie was injured in a workplace accident. His workplace was, like the customers, a coal mine. Folks would order the food and then return to their automobiles. Annie would call their names out when the meals were ready. Pitchler family stepped up their games on Saturdays, clearing out the front room of furniture in their house to accommodate diners. They'd even throw a dance. It wasn't just great food you could get if you were a weary traveler at Chicken Annie's, it was Kansas hospitality. And let's not forget the traveler aspect, though, as many folks migrated west during the Great Depression from points east to California. By 1935, Anne was selling pan-fried chicken as well. Ann Pitchler retired in 1963, and the restaurant has been handed down to new generations since then. Now, down the road a piece from the Pitchler family lived Mary, and this is another great name, Zerngast. Guess what? Guess where Zerngast is from?
Zerngast.
Zungast,
Germany?
Germany. And I looked up what this means, and it means Zern can mean a number of things. It could mean wrathful or
Hmm.
angry. And
Hmm.
Gast, I thought Gast meant ghost, but it actually means guest. So wrathful guest.
Wow. No, thank you.
But Mary Zerngast found herself in a similar situation that Anne had faced years prior. Mary and her husband Joe were German immigrants, as I said, and Joe worked in the local mines until a health issue forced him to quit. This was 1942, and I'm guessing that a lot of miners develop respiratory problems up to and including the notorious black lung, which we associate with
Right.
coal mines in Kentucky, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. A mining career of 25 years underground carries with it a 10% chance of developing the disease. Even without contracting black lung, I'd imagine inhaling coal dust over a period of years is going to be detrimental to one's health,
Right.
regardless of whether or not you get black lung. Mary started selling fried chicken much in the way Anne did by opening her home to diners. In addition to her chicken, her German potato salad was a huge hit by itself, let alone as a side dish. Marvin in San Antonio, are you getting hungry now? Because I know German food is your thing, Marvin. Marvin and I used to eat at the old Hofbrau on San Pedro rather frequently about 30 years ago.
Hmm.
The Zerngast's venture proved so successful that in 1945, the family bought a pool hall down the road and converted it into a restaurant, one originally called Joe's Place, but it became Chicken Mary's. This carried on through until 1961 when Joe passed away and Mary unfortunately suffered a stroke. The restaurant closed for half a year and reopened as a weekend only joint until Mary's son and daughter in law, whose names were Zig and Tootie, respectively, could get it going as a full time restaurant in 1966. Mary died in 1980, and the restaurant has passed through the generations since. There seems to be a popular misconception that Ann Pitchler and Mary Zerngast were actually related at the time they opened their restaurants. They weren't, but then they became related, kind of, sort of. In 1970, a young married couple opened their own fried chicken house named Pitchler's Chicken Annie's.
Hmm.
The husband was Ann Pitchler's grandson, and the wife was Mary Zerngast's granddaughter. So eventually, the two families did come together. For the record, though both locations have moved here and there throughout the years, they've always been in the same area. Currently, Chicken Annie's is located at 1143 East 600th Avenue and Chicken Mary's at 1133 East 600th Avenue in Pittsburgh, Kansas. They're not as close as the American and Lafayette diners in Detroit, but they are a mere 2/10 of a mile apart. As a final note, the history of these two restaurants serves as the inspiration for K.J. Dell'Antonia's 2020 novel, The Chicken Sisters. In September 2024, Bryan, a Hallmark TV series of the same name debuted, based on the said novel. The show is currently on hiatus, with 8 season 1 episodes ready to watch on the Hallmark Plus streaming service.
Huh.
Every episode, every episode's title ends with the word y'all. Bryan, I don't have the Hallmark streaming service, but Bay Area Brad does, and he says the show's great.
Yeah.
I don't judge. I don't judge you, buddy. You enjoy that Hallmark TV series now. But thanks again to Bay Area Brad for the suggestion. I had never heard of Chicken Mary's and Chicken Annie's, but it is well within the spirit
Right.
of the first 2 chapters we've covered, to the point now where I'm working on a part 4
Oh
of
God.
this that I'll get down the line of another restaurant rivalry. I'm doing some research on it now because I've become fascinated with the way that, and this is certainly, indicative of it, that people really kind of build their identity around a portion of their identity around where they like to eat.
Mm.
And this one seems to be a little bit friendlier than other ones, than the other two. maybe because of the familial relations to the families. But like I said, there are 6 restaurants like this in Crawford County, 6
Oh
that
wow.
serve basically the same dish, just a little bit different. And um, I actually had the opportunity to, after doing this story, we went to celebrate a friend's graduation from nursing school on Sunday afternoon, and it was at a German beer house here in a beer garden here in Colorado. And I'll be damned if they didn't have potato salad. It wasn't German potato salad, which,
uh,
as I understand it, is more vinegary and it's served warm as opposed to the cold potato salad we're
yeah.
used to. Still pretty damn good though.
Mhm.
And they have the classic stuff, the schnitzel and the all those good German stuff. So Marvin, if you ever make it out this way, I know where I'm taking you to eat. Prost Biergarten here in Colorado.
Very cool.
Yep. Thanks again to Barry and Brad, man. Thank you for listening and
Yeah. Thanks,
checking in
Brad.
with us. Appreciate
That's
it.
funny.
Sources for this article or story were Jason Blevins, September 15th, 2023 article from coloradosun.com, an article titled Mount Evans renamed Mount Blue Sky after federal naming board vote, effective immediately. Mercedes Nolan's really cool little article here on nicest.com. Um, that is incorrect. That is necces.com. Geographic FAQ from February 22nd, 2025. Chris Wilson's travelkansas.com article, Kansas Fried Chicken Drives Narrative of Novel from April 26th of 2023. epguides.com for episode on the Chicken Sisters TV show, familydestinationsguide.com for dining info in Kansas, usgs.gov for the board on geographic names. Fascinating website, absolutely fascinating if you're into this kind of stuff. The Chicken Annie and Chicken Mary's websites, and Wikipedia for basic info on the different Pittsburghs and Pittsburgh State University.
Excellent.
And now I'm hungry.
Yeah. So, as far as I know, San Antonio doesn't really have a good German spot any longer. There was a place north of Austin I went a time or two to get some German
Mhm.
fare. We do actually have. There is, much to my surprise, a Der Wiener Schnitzel location here. Remember that fast food chain?
Is that with the red roofs and
Uh-huh.
the yeah,
The
yeah,
A
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the
But
A-frame red roofs, yeah.
I think I haven't eaten it. I mean, it's just fat. I mean, I'm sure it's garbage fast food. It's awful. But as a kid, I remember going to those places and kind of loving them because there was one, must have been one in El Paso, I think I went to. And so there's one of those here. But as far as I know, that's it. So Hopbrow is gone. And Flying Saucer kind of had
They
some
did. That's right. Yeah,
German
yeah, yeah.
fare, but I think that whole chain closed. So yeah, I'm not sure where the yeah in New Braunfels must have some German.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's got to have some German
And
fare.
that's why when people talk about Tex-Mex, it's like if you get out of the hill country, man, there's some great German restaurants, Czech restaurants. I mean, it's
Right.
just man, that's some good eating when you get that I'm more of a chicken schnitzel guy, which I guess is not really, I don't know if that's really schnitzel or not, but
No, it's not,
not
that's not kosher. No.
I don't dig on swine. So um anyway,
Diva. God.
that is Tale of Two Restaurants Part 3, Chicken Annie's and Chicken Mary's. All right.
All right. Cool.
All right. Go out and eat some potato salad.
Hmm.
Be good to each other. Be nice. Prost and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Bryan, thank you for a wonderful story on Cudjoe Lewis. It's a character I've never heard of from history. And again, one of those wonderful stories that makes up the tapestry that is the best of this country. Not the worst, the best.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, folks. Please check out Dream Idiots. Order yourself a T-shirt or a magnet or something if you want. Like, share, subscribe. All the tech stuff for our site is going to be fixed this week, and we'll keep on trundling with 150 next week.
All right. That's, yeah, we got to do something special for that. Or,
I'm probably doing a two-parter starting next week.
oh, all
So
right. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll have to figure it out. I've got a couple stories that are almost finished, so I'll have to figure out what fits best. Thanks, folks. Be good to each other.
bye bye.